Good evening. Good evening. I want to thank you guys for joining us. We're going to get started in just a second. All right, welcome to tonight's training. My name is Brenton Harrison with Escape Student Loan Debt. We are an online education company that offers programs with step-by-step debt reduction, debt elimination techniques for federal and private student loan borrowers whose student loan payments or their student loan balance have become a major barrier in one aspect of their life. That could be their marriage, that could be their credit, that could be their dreams for home ownership or business ownership. Whatever that area that it's impacting or the multiple areas that it's impacting, we offer programs that fit that need. In tonight's training, I want to tell you a bit about our student Tonya. Tonya came to us a few years ago in her early 40s, and she was the proud graduate of an HBCU, as are many of our students. And when she went to her HBCU, it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. She got a couple degrees from that HBCU. And at the time, believe it or not, student loan payments were not as flexible as they are now. I know that sounds odd to say if you have student loans that you're struggling with, but back at that time, there were not as many repayment options. Interest rates were higher. And when it came to Tonya and her student loans, it's not that they were things that just completely wrecked her finances at the time, but student loans were something that were just always there. And it was like the expectation that you would just have them in your financial life no matter what. It's the same opinion that we see with many people when it comes to credit card debt. There are people who have had credit card debt for so long, they just assume that everybody has credit card debt and you have to have credit card debt, when that's really not the case. And for Tonya, with it being such an ever-present part of her financial life, it became something that she just kind of got used to and paid over the years, didn't really stress or complain about it. But after all that period of time, this Tonya's student loan debt, it's still at the end of 15, 20 years was sitting at around $40,000. Again, not all the money in the world, but definitely after 20 years worth of payments, not something that you want to see. Now, Tonya and her husband have two high-achieving sons, and both of their sons are the type that are just always trying to outdo each other. They're always trying to get better grades than the other, do better in sports than the other. And as part of that motivation, as part of that competitiveness, both of them got into really good schools. That's a great thing, but once they get into those great schools have to be paid for. And Tonya did not want her sons to be in the position that she was in, where student loans were just an ever-present part of their finances. So she decided that she was going to take out debt on their behalf, and she took out what's called a Parent Plus loan. If you have a Parent Plus loan, I didn't need to explain that term to you, but if you don't, a Parent Plus loan is a plus loan that a parent takes out on behalf of the student when they have exceeded the amount that they can borrow in federal student loans for undergraduate schooling. You can take it out regardless, even if they haven't exceeded it. But Tonya wanted to make sure that they just never had that opportunity to be burdened by the debt in the way that she was when it came to her college years. Now, throughout that period of time of their schooling, she's taken on more and more debt. And if you've had college students that you've had to help with in the past, you know that tuition is not the end of the financial assistance that they need. Her kids needed help with things when they happened to their car. They needed money to take some girls on dates. They needed money for food when they ran out. It seemed like these kids never went to the cafeteria. And as a result, Tonya's consumer debt, in addition to the parent student loans, just grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where it was just absolutely unmanageable in terms of moving ahead financially. Now, one of the great things that many people that we work with have at their disposal that they're not aware that they can use to their benefit in terms of deploying it against their student loans is she had a tremendous amount of equity in the home that she shared with her husband. And that equity can be used in many ways. And one of those ways is a tool called a cash out refinance. And when we were looking at this option, we were looking at it to not just say, hey, we need to do some things to impact the student loan debt, but also because that consumer debt had just become so consuming that we had to find a way to build some headway, even if we were going to move that out of the way so we could focus on the student loans more thoroughly. Now, we get this strategy. We say, hey, this is something that we feel can free up a lot of money. And Tonya goes and she takes this information to her lender. Her lender runs the numbers and they come back and they say, hey, Tonya, you are right. That would be a great move for you financially. But unfortunately, when we look at what you're paying towards your consumer debt, and when we look at what you're paying towards your credit cards, your lines of credit, your car loans, and now your student loan, we feel that you are quote unquote over leveraged. They're essentially saying that there's a tool that they use called your debt to income ratio. How much money do I bring in and how much money do I spend in terms of debt payments compared to that income? And the lender felt that her debt to income ratio was too high. So they're saying, hey, we know that this would free up the money, but we're not going to give you the loan to free up the money because you have so much money that you're paying towards the other loans. And if you're having trouble following that sentence, imagine how Tonya was feeling when she was trying to negotiate this situation with her lender. Now, the reason that we wanted to do this is we're looking at this and we're saying, hey, we have to find a way to free up that money in the budget, and there's no place else to do it unless we tap that equity. And one of the things we had working in our benefit at that time was the federal student loan payment freeze. Since the CARES Act in, I want to say it was April of 2020, there have been a pause on federal student loan payments for a particular type of loan. And we were able to negotiate with their lender through that payment freeze a way to lower Tonya's debt to income ratio. Not only that, for one of her children that was in schooling, we found out that the way that that loan payment was being reported was inaccurate. Not because of anything that the student loan servicer had done, not because of any errors on her credit report, but strictly because Tonya had not told her lender a very crucial piece of information that let the lender know that that debt to income ratio they were looking at was inaccurate. So we made sure we gave that up-to-date information. We also made sure that we adjusted some of her consumer debt in terms of how she was paying it, so it lowered that as well. And one of the things I hope you're getting from this video is the way that we can get to student loans is not always through the student loans directly. We actually took some time to look at how student loans fit into her credit card debt and things of that nature, freed up some payments on the credit card debt, and positioned Tonya over a 3-month period so she could actually take the equity out of that home. Now, you're probably saying, okay, now she's got the equity. She can probably pay off those student loans now. And that's the end of this journey for Tonya when it comes to escaping student loan debt. But you would be wrong because, again, sometimes the best way to handle the loans in terms of how they fit in your finances is by attacking another part of your finances first. So we actually decided that Tonya was not going to use a dime of that equity to pay off her student loans, and she would instead pay off all of her consumer debt. Because the consumer debt had the higher interest rate when compared to her student loans, it had the higher payment compared to the student loans. And believe it or not, if you understand how federal student loan repayment plans work, the payment plans you have at your disposal are far more flexible than what you have with your typical form of consumer debt. So we actually did all these machinations to free Tonya up to focus on her student loans and use that flexibility to her disposal instead of just immediately rushing to pay off something that was actually better positioned than the other things she was dealing with financially. So when you're looking at what the lesson is from this, I hope that you're realizing that everything that happens in your financial life does not happen in a vacuum. You can't do one thing over here with your student loans that only impacts your student loans. What you do with your student loans impacts your credit debt, impacts your investments, impacts your retirement, impacts your insurance. And you have to make sure that whenever you do anything that impacts one item, that you fully understand the impact on the other items of your finances as well. This is how we gave Tonya that flexibility and made sure that she understood we're not paying off the debt. We're making it so that the situation is beneficial to the rest of her finances as a whole. Once again, my name is Brenton Harrison with Escape Student Loan Debt. If you're watching these videos and you've enjoyed them and you know that you are struggling with federal or private student loan debt and you need a particular step-by-step plan to reposition, refinance, consolidate, even have your student loans forgiven, I invite you to click the link at the bottom of this video or at the end of this video and get that plan started. I'll see you tomorrow.